Sam tato jayamudirajit nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtuki. Before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, one should offer one's respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto the goddess Saraswati, who is the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart becomes almost completely destroyed, and devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes established within one's heart as an irrevocable fact. Good morning. We are studying Canto 2, Chapter 3, Text 21 today. And I'll do a call and response. When we come to the time for the audience to chant, we'll have the devotees here in the temple chant first, just to have it go smoother and have a system. And then devotees on Zoom, they can chant after that. Para parampata kirita justam apyutamangam nanamena mukundam shavo karo no kurute saparyam harir lasat kanchana kankayova para parampata kirita justam apyutamangam nanamena mukundam Savo karo no kurute saparyam Hare lasat kanchana kankanova. Vara parampata kirita justam apyutamangam namen mukundam shavo karo no kurute saparyam hare lasa kanchana kankarova. Vara parampata kirita justam apyutamangam namenin mukundam shavo karo no kurute saparyam hare lasa kanchana kankanova. Okay, devotees online, they'd like to chant.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Vara parampata kirita justam appe uttamangam naname mukundam shavao karauno kurute shaparyam hare lashat kanchana kankanava.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Bara parampata kritita justam api utamangam namame mukundam shavai karono kurute saparyam hare lasat kanchana kanka nova.
भरापरं पद्मकिरीटजुष्टम् अपे उत्तमं नमेन मुकुन्दम् सवौकरौ न कुरुते सपर्यं हरेर्लसत्काञ्चन कङ्कणौ वा. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else? Okay, we'll repeat the word for word. Bara, a great burden. Param, heavy. Pata, silk. Kirita, turban. Justam, dressed with. Api, even. Uttama, upper. Angam, parts of the body. Na, never. Namet, bow down. Mukundam, Lord Krishna, the deliverer. Shava, dead bodies. Karo, hands. No, do not. Kurute, do. Saparyam, worshipping. Hare, of the personality of Godhead. Lasat, glittering. Kanchana, made of gold. Kankano, bangles. Va, even though. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. The upper portion of the body, though crowned with a silk turban, is only a heavy burden if not bowed down before the personality of Godhead, who can award mukti, freedom. And the hands, though decorated with glittering bangles, are like those of a dead man, if not engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead, Hari. I love these heavy verses that really bring to a reality the true truth about this material world. Purport. As stated herein before, there are three kinds of devotees of the Lord. The first class devotee does not at all see anyone who is not in the service of the Lord. But the second class devotee makes distinctions between devotees and non-devotees. The second class devotees are therefore meant for preaching work. And as referred to in the above verse, they must loudly preach the glories of the Lord. The second class devotee accepts disciples from the section of the third class devotees or non-devotees. Sometimes the first class devotee also comes down to the category of the second class devotee for preaching work. But the common man, who is expected to become at least a third class devotee, is advised herein to visit the temple of the Lord and bow down before the deity, even though he may be a rich man or even a king with a silk turban or crown. The Lord is the Lord of everyone, including the great kings and emperors, and the men who are rich in estimation of mundane people must therefore make it a point to visit the temple of Lord Sri Krishna and regularly bow down before the deity. The Lord in the temple, in the worshipful form, is never to be considered to be made of stone or wood. For the Lord in his Archa incarnation as the deity in the temple shows immense favor to the fallen souls by his auspicious presence. By the hearing process, as mentioned herein before, this realization of the presence of the Lord in the temple is made possible. As such, the first process in the routine work of devotional service, hearing, is the essential point. Hearing by all classes of devotees from the authentic sources like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam is essential. The common man who is puffed up with his material position does not bow down before the deity of the Lord in the temple, or who defies temple worship without any knowledge of the science, must know that his so-called turban or crown will only succeed in further drowning him in the water of this ocean of material existence. A drowning man with a heavy weight on his head is sure to go down more swiftly than those who have no heavy weight. A foolish, puffed up man defies the science of God and says that God has no meaning for him. But when he is in the grip of God's law and is caught by some disease like cerebral thrombosis, which is the hemorrhaging of the brain due to a blood clot, that godless man sinks into the ocean of nescience by the weight of his material acquisition. Advancement of the material science without God consciousness is a heavy load on the head of human society. And so one must take heed of this great warning. The common man, if he has no time to worship the Lord, may at least engage his hands for a few seconds in washing or sweeping the Lord's temple. Maharaj Prataparudra, the greatly powerful king of Orissa, was always very busy with heavy state responsibilities. Yet he made it a point to sweep the temple of Lord Jagannath at Puri once a year during the festival of the Lord. The idea is that however important a man one may be, he must accept the supremacy of the Supreme Lord. This God consciousness will help a man even in his material prosperity. Maharaj Prataparudra's subordination before the Lord Jagannath made him a powerful king, so much so that even the great Patan in his time could not enter into Orissa on account of the powerful Maharaj Prataparudra. And at last, Maharaj Prataparudra was graced by Lord Chaitanya on the very grounds of his acceptance of subordination to the Lord of the universe. So even though a rich man's wife has glittering bangles made of gold on her hands, she must engage herself in rendering service to the Lord. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Agyanatimbadandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. The verse once again. The upper portion of the body, although crowned with a silk turban, is only a heavy burden if not bow down before the personality of Godhead, who can award mukti, freedom. And the hands, though decorated with glittering bangles, are like those of a dead man, if not engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead, Hari. So this verse is comes out very strong. And in essence, it is telling us that whatever material possessions that we may have, whatever riches we acquire, whatever fame, recognition, credentials we may acquire in this life, they have no value to us if they're not engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord. The reasoning for this is because all of these things will be diminished in time. And whatever value that we give to these articles that we acquire, they only have material value. And that material value is only something that takes place over a short period of time. The example is given that these things are like zeros. Zeros have actually no value. If you look at your bank account and you see 20 zeros or 1 0, it's of the same value. 20 zeros and 1 0, it's all zero. But if you put a 1 in front of that 0, now all of a sudden those zeros actually have value. So if a person has a silk turban or a person has a lot of fancy jewelry, and this is the stuff that people save up for and spend their money on. They buy fancy clothes. Sometimes, you find people, they have 30, 40, 50 different pairs of shoes. And they just have an addiction to going and saying, what are you doing? I'm going to go shopping. We're going to New York. We're going to go shopping. They go out and they spend thousands and thousands of dollars buying new clothes, buying, different types of hats and buying different types of shoes and coats and, pants. Yes, we need some things to work in this world, to live in this world, to clothe our bodies. But there's over-endeavoring to try to accumulate more than what is necessary to decorate our bodies, which will only eventually grow old, get diseased, and perish from this world. Then what is left? The family goes in and they clean out the house. And the person has finally left their body. And what do? They go through their clothes. Anybody want this? No, throw it away. Anybody want this? No, throw it away. Give it to the Salvation Army. And something that was worth so much money, spent so much time purchasing, now becomes just a remnant that is given to somebody who's poor in need, or just gets discharged in the trash. So our lives should not be spent in this way. It should be spent developing our love for the Supreme Lord Krishna. And there's given in this purport how we should actually engage our life and time in service. Srila Prabhupada starts off by stating that there are 3 kinds of devotees of the Lord. You may remember this, and these are terms that we should remember. We'll start at the 3rd class at the bottom. And when we talk about these class distinctions, these are only important for our progress and understanding where we are and how to associate with devotees properly for our spiritual advancement. A much bigger description is given of this in the 5th verse of the Nectar of Instruction. But the 3rd class or lower class of the devotee, that's called the Kanishta Adhikar. The Kanishta Adhikar is at the beginning stage of their worship of Lord Krishna. They've just begun to chant the holy names. Their faith is weak, and their knowledge of the scriptures has not yet developed. And because of this, they often become proud or unstable in their devotional service. Sometimes they come in and out. They lose enthusiasm very easily, and they gain enthusiasm very quickly. So as they go through this kind of the ebbs and flows of devotional life in and out, because their faith is unsteady, and their knowledge is also not fully developed at that point. In this verse, Srila Prabhupada is especially saying how for these people, coming to the temple and engaging in devotional service in the temple is essential. Oftentimes, because at this stage of the Kanishta Adhikari, and he also includes kind of non-devotees, people that even taken to the, or recognize themselves taking to the process of devotional service. They usually only see God in the temple. They can't really see God everywhere else. They see, okay, I come, I bow down before God, but I don't necessarily recognize God within my fellow human being, within the animal, within all living beings. So therefore, engagement in devotional service is essential. Especially coming and engaging in activities like cleaning the temple. Because why? This purifies one's existence and purifies one's heart. I remember when I first came to the temple, devotees would always put me to work, or engage me in service. You would come in and they would say, here's a broom, or here's the lawnmower. Can you do some service? And in my mind, I would think, okay, they need some help here at the temple. And oftentimes our mind goes to this and they think, I need some help. They need some help. Okay, something's not being done. On the external level, that may be true. But on the internal level, the consciousness should be that actually they are doing me such a favor by engaging me in this service, that they're actually connecting me to Krishna in a way that I would never be able to be connected to Krishna. Imagine for a moment, we are going, Krishna has descended, and he is in Vrindavan. He appeared from Goloka Vrindavan, and we are all going to see him. We're on the first plane out of here, and we are going. Krishna has descended from the spiritual world. Everybody is migrating to Vrindavan to see Krishna. And then we get to Krishna's abode, and we see him. And we're told by the people at the door, welcome. Welcome. Come, please take darshan of the Supreme Lord Krishna. And we would say, is there any service that we can render? Is there anything that we can do to please our Lord? And then they would say, would you mind helping sweep the steps here? So many people are coming through. We want to keep it clean. We'd be overjoyed, something that we can do to please our Lord. Remember, Krishna has descended. Krishna is here. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying, we should not see the deity as stone or wood or metal. We can actually see that actually Krishna is present before us in the Archa Vigraha form. By the power of Lord Krishna's omnipotence, he can enter in through his spirit into matter. And why does he do this? For our benefit. The deity has come so that we can engage in eternal service of using our body and senses in the service of the Lord. And in doing so, we train ourselves for that eternal service in the spiritual world of serving Krishna. His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj, when he, in Dallas and in Houston, he created communities there around the temple. And he had a beautiful vision. And that vision was that all of his disciples and all of the devotees that were around, they were to purchase properties and houses and apartments within walking distance of the temple. And his vision was that the deity would be at the center of everyone's life. And every morning, people from the community would come and worship and serve the deity. And then throughout the day, they would come at different schedules and serve the deity. And the temple would be at the center of everybody's life. They would come and hear about Krishna. They would come and serve Krishna. And everybody would be engaged at some point in the service of the deity. And this actually happened. And I was there in Houston recently. And you see, devotees are living here. So where are you going? I'm going to my house. And you're thinking, okay, you're not going in your car. No, I just live right down the street. Where do you live? Oh, half a mile away. It was actually a really wonderful thing to see. Here in Philadelphia, we also have some devotees that live close by. But also we have people that live quite a distance, and it's hard for them to come. But we can see the benefit of actually having the temple be the center of people's lives. When we see this, sometimes the thought, two thoughts come to mind. The one is sometimes the deities are needy. The deities at some point may become a burden. Oh, I have to come. Deities need to be served. They need our care. Somebody needs to come and help out. The danger of that thought is that we think that Krishna is dependent upon us. And then we also think that the service that I render to Krishna, is according to my terms. So I'm just going to give you what I can give you and what I want to give you, Krishna, because you need me after all. So this is a very dangerous consciousness to fall into. On the flip side of it, we should actually see that the service that one receives is actually saving you. It is pulling you out of material existence and giving you the opportunity to engage in transcendental service to the Lord. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, give me 1 second to find this here. The Lord in the temple in the worshipful form is never to be considered to be made of stone or wood, for the Lord in his Archa incarnation as a deity in the temple shows immense favor to the fallen souls by his auspicious presence. So we can imagine, a community where, every day devotees are just, coming all the time, and you have new people coming all the time to the temple, and they're taking shelter of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada is stressing here that the deity to be the center of that community. The other part of it is sometimes in preaching, and this has come up, over the last 20 years or so, there's this thought that deity worship is not necessary or not required. And a lot of times, sometimes you'll have preachers, they'll say, Jai Shishi Gaurnitai ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki Jai, Shishi Radha Shard Bihari ki Jai. Oh, deities are going to freak people out. If you show people the deities, they're going to get turned off. And therefore, we should basically hide the deities when people come to the temple. That is not required. It's not a requirement. But this isn't what Srila Prabhupada is saying. He's saying, bring people to the temple and properly teach them the culture of deity worship and engage in the process of hearing and chanting for the pleasure of the deity and for people's upliftment. And through the process of proper hearing, one will get a proper understanding of the service that one can engage in. When we look at the mission of ISKCON, it can be divided into two categories. One is inreach and the other is outreach. To serve society at large by engaging them, by educating them on the spiritual science as taught in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, to preach the movement of Lord Chaitanya of Harinam Sankirtan. So that is the outreach part of it. The inreach is to actually develop communities with Krishna as the center. so that people can be engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. Those that you go out to pull into the service of the Lord, now to engage them in the service of the Lord. So this in-reach and outreach has to go along as kind of two tracks that a train rides on. Both are essential for the health of a spiritual community. The growth, the preaching, the outreach, always giving opportunity for people to come and meet Krishna. And then when they come to meet Krishna, there's education, there's engagement, and then there's service. So the second class of devotee, the Madhyam Adhikari, that's the middle category, where a devotee, they have more faith, their faith is more developed, and their knowledge is more developed. And due to their knowledge being developed, they have spiritual intelligence, and they have the power to discriminate, not based upon material discrimination, but spiritual discrimination. They don't discriminate based upon caste, creed, gender, age. Their discrimination is based upon, seeing, okay, this person is qualified, this person has an inclination for devotional service, this person, is a complete, illusion, and they're not going to. So they preach, but they make some distinction between devotee and non-devotee, or one being able to be a potential devotee. These are the preachers. And Srila Prabhupada is telling us that one at least has to come to the point of being a Kanishta Adhikari. At least come into the circle of devotees. Our goal should be that all the common people of this world at least come to that point where they chant the holy names of the Lord and think favorably about Lord Krishna. But we want to rise ourselves up to the point where we become preachers, this Madhyam level. So to do this, it requires our commitment to going out and trying to serve the Lord in the form of preaching the holy names, distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, chanting the holy names. We are, and then finding other ways in society that we can interact with people to bring them in contact with Krishna. Today, we're at Temple University. Temple University, 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock at the bell tower, doing this service. Going out, spreading the message of Harinam Sankirtan, making Srila Prabhupada's books available to people, and just listening to the devotees. I had the experience too of going out and seeing when people are walking by and they hear the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, they're changed, even if it's for a moment, and that moment may come back again, may come full circle. We don't know when, but even for that moment, they hear that holy name and they feel relief. The smile on their face, the innocent nod of, okay, you've done something for me. I may have a meeting to go to, I may have an appointment, I may be on an important phone call, but you just did something for me. And I recognize that. I've been changed. This is our duty, this is our service. At the same time, but it all comes back to our practice of devotional service. The third class, or excuse me, the last class, which is the first class of devotee, is the Uttama Adhikari. And the Uttama Adhikari is very interesting because they're so elevated. Their elevation is so high that they don't discriminate between who is fallen and who is not. We see this as the quality of Lord Chaitanya, is that not discriminating about who's fallen and who is not, he gives the holy name to everyone. And he thinks everybody, to be engaged in the service of the Lord. This cannot be imitated. And quite honestly, I can't even understand it myself, because even just trying to understand, well, how do you not see? That Uttamaधिकारी actually sees everybody as more elevated than himself. But yet they're at the highest stage of devotional life. So in order to preach, they actually have to come down to the point of the Madhyamadhikari to be able to discriminate. So a description of this Uttamaधिकारी is given in the Nectar of Instruction. And it says that one should associate and faithfully serve that pure devotee who is advanced in undeviated devotional service and whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. So because the Uttamaधिकारी has the vision to see everyone engaged in service in some capacity, and he thinks of them better than himself, they don't criticize, because they see that, okay, even if one is involved in the material energy, somehow or other they're engaging in the service of the Lord. And therefore, there's no need to criticize. No need to make this distinction of this person is qualified, this person is not. Maharaj Pataparudra, he was the king of Orissa at the time where Lord Chaitanya was in Puri. And there's some verses from the Chaitanya Charitamrita that describe this. I'd like to read to everyone, because the king is oftentimes looked upon as, being ordained by God, and therefore worshipable by his position. So the activities that a king is involved in oftentimes is thought of, okay, well, it is quite elevated and advanced. They're protecting and providing for all of their society that they're ruling. So he had a desire, knowing that Lord Chaitanya was a very important person, a powerful sannyasi who was preaching, and he wanted to get his association. But Lord Chaitanya, not wanting to involve himself with worldly people, even somebody as important as the king, he would deny any type of meeting. But when Rath Yatra came around, and Maharaj Prataparudra understood that actually above him, even though he's a very powerful person in society, above him is God. He went out and he began sweeping the Rath Yatra path in front of Lord Jagannath. So this is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, 13th chapter. While the Lord was being carried from the throne to the car, King Pataparudra personally engaged in the Lord's service by cleansing the road with a broom that had a golden handle. The king sprinkled on the road sandalwood scented water. So he gave some thought to it. He didn't just get a bucket and throw it down. He wanted scented water to give some fragrance for the Lord to smell. Although he was the owner of the royal throne, he engaged in menial service for the sake of Lord Jagannath. This is important for us to remember. Although the king was the most exalted, respectable person, still he accepted menial service for the Lord. He therefore became a suitable candidate for receiving the Lord's mercy. And the word Srila Prabhupada gives here is menial service. Upon seeing the king engaged in such menial service, Lord Chaitanya became very happy simply by rendering this service, the king received the mercy of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, unless one receives the mercy of the Lord, he cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead or engage in his devotional service. A devotee who has received even a small fraction of the mercy of the Lord can understand him. Others may engage in theoretical speculation to the Lord, but they cannot know anything about him. So this comes back to the original point. This service is something that everyone needs. And Lord Chaitanya is expressing this so vividly with the pastime of Maharaj Pataparuja, that even somebody who is a great king could not gain the favor of the Lord unless they came down to the level of a menial servant. We must lose our titles, our whoever we think we may be, and we must come down to the level of das das anudas. And then at that point, free of material designations, free of upadis, our hearts become cleansed, and we lose our material identification, and we see ourselves, I exist only for the pleasure of Krishna. So when people come to the temple, our community, our congregation, they should be engaged in the service of the Lord for their benefit. And as congregation members, we should not see this as, oh, well, temple needs my help, so I'll give it, I have 10 minutes to give, so, I'll do it. And we should think, may I please have some service? Come anytime during the week, and you can engage in this type of devotional activity. This is what pleases Lord Chaitanya. When you come on Sunday, come and help clean. Before, after, especially after the Sunday program. Take a broom and say, hey, just like Maharaj Pataparuja was cleaning in front of Lord Jagannath, clean the temple, clean the prasadam hall, clean the stairs, the artik trays. Look for ways to be involved in service. And if you do it, you'll find that your heart will become overflooded with joy. You'll think, wow, I never thought this activity would bring such happiness. Sometimes people think, oh, that's for other people. That's not for me. I'll sit and I'll just talk philosophy, or I'll talk and I'll socialize instead. Just try it a couple times and see what will happen within your heart. What will happen within your heart is the awakening of a relationship with Krishna. Because in order to awaken that relationship with Krishna, Krishna has to be pleased. Krishna has to grant you that. It is not totally within your control. Krishna has to open that door from his side. In the prayers, the Guru Astakam prayers by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Shi Vigrahada Nana Nityanana Shringaratan Mandira Marjanado Uktash Tata Vatam Tatam Nikunjatopi Vande Goroshi Sharanaravinda. So the spiritual master is always engaged in worshiping the deity of the Lord, and he engages his disciples in such worship, decorating them with beautiful ornaments and jewelry and clothes. And then also engaging in the temple, marjanado, the marjana, the cleaning of the temple. That is also directly deity worship. So in this way, everyone can take part in this. Second initiated, first initiated, not initiated. There's some way that a person can be engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord. Also, we see Maharaj Ambarish, another king. It's described in the Bhagavatam, how even though he was a great and powerful king, He engaged his body in the service of the Lord. He used his feet to walk to the temple. He used his hands in cleansing the temple of the Lord. So this idea of cleaning the temple for the common people, what to speak of the heads of society, is for everyone. It's for everyone's purification. Please don't think of this as a managerial activity. Oh, this is just needed for one's upkeep. No, this is required for our spiritual relationship with Krishna. Okay, I'll stop here. See if there's any reflections or realizations on this topic. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Mari Gupta Prabhu. I'm going to ask you to do something. People can't hear you, so I'm going to ask you to hold this because we can do that because it's important.
Hare Krishna. My obeisances to all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavas. I really like that analogy of the drowning man. I always am in awe of Srila Prabhupada's poetic nature and how he paints that picture, of like the crown and the weight of like the material, I guess decorations, but in that sense, it would be responsibilities in a way, wearing the crown, but like these things can like weigh us, and they can actually become very problematic, like in a sense of like the drowning man, the weight of it pushing you under. And also, you were talking about the people who just collect things, they go shopping and spend thousands of dollars a year. I used to clean the house of some of my friends, some Christian friends of mine, and they were just so busy, and they couldn't clean their house. And I'm like OCD, so it's a very easy service for me. But every time I would go, they would literally have like 3 big bags of clothes that they never even wore with the tags still on them to go to the Goodwill. They would literally just work and then they would go shopping just because of their shopping addiction, because that's what they thought, they didn't really have that strong sense and compass, which was great for me because I always got new shoes and things like that. I was always the first one going through those sets. So it was pretty wild. I was like, wow, I can't believe these people spend this much money on, the importance of engaging others. I think of like, I learned to sing in the dish pit in Denver, it's down in the basement. And after the Sunday feast, I would do the dishes. And then I graduated to the bathrooms. And then eventually I was able, I start sneaking early in the morning. I did snow removal and I'd shovel all the walks for the devotees in the temple before Mangal Arti. And then the temple president was like, hey, like, I know it's not the winter anymore. You're good at like this motion. Would you like to sweep the temple? And then, so the sweeping the temple, and then, then I was cleaning the bathrooms. I had the keys. And I mean, it was just a real blessing, like every night getting to come off of work and sweep the temple. It was like, it's still one of my favorite services, I always find engaging people like according to their nature is very important as well. I always see these sparks of inspiration in certain areas, like a devotee that cooks, getting them in the kitchen, or, a devotee that has some kind of musical nature, like getting some cartels in their hand and showing them the basics. And you really seem to watch them flourish when, because we're all individual and Krishna relishes that individuality. I really liked your point on Krishna being the center, the deities being the center of everybody's lives. And I think of Dallas when I think of that. That was his Maharaj's main community, right? And you see that when you go there, the park, you see the park, it's like always devotees. It's like, I mean, and all the properties around that place, Denver was kind of like that, it's really special. I like the non-discrimination point as well. I always admired that about Lord Nityananda, and it's really his mercy of seeing me, because like most devotees would pass by me and be like, no, he's too fallen. you know, when I was a drug dealer, when I was riding with motorcycle clubs. But Lord Nityananda said, no, he is the perfect candidate. And the reason why that, you know, I would be considered a perfect candidate is because when the change of heart happens with somebody like myself, you know, other people see that. They're like, wow, you know, there must be something to this. And I've noticed that with my friends. I always thought I was going to be criticized for coming to Hare Krishna or something, but people were like, wow, you know, and they actually really appreciate the process because they see that it's changed my heart, you know, and I'm able to see that in other people, you know, like no matter who comes and sits on that mat or dances with us. I mean, it's always wonderful. I always think of Lord Nityananda in that story and pastime, you know, or even like Lord Chaitanya was going to kill, you know, Jagai, you know, for his offenses. He said, man, you're going to have to kill everybody in the stage. They're all falling like this. So, yeah, you know, and I guess like the attachment of like the menial services is like really what kept me coming back. You know, I was told if you scrub the toilets, it cleans your heart faster. And so that was like my menial service in Denver. And then my first service back from my cancer treatment, I was bedridden still all week, but I would hobble out of the van, you know, and then our apartment to the bathrooms. And I would spend, you know, it'd take me 2 hours to clean the bathrooms every week. And I would do that even though I was like still really ill, you know, but my attachment to that service, you know, and it just, you know, and little by little, you know, building that muscle memory and like actually like getting back to the point where I could do other services is very special. But, you know, Andrew Prabhu used to scrub the toilets and he missed his spot in the 24-hour kirtan one time. And somebody came, Prabhu, your spot, you know, you're supposed to be doing kirtan. And he's like on the floor. He's like, this is my kirtan, you know, and it's very important to understand that, you know, you know, these menial services are absolutely wonderful. And it's all the same, you know, we're all serving deities, you know, so. Hare Krishna, everybody.
Thank you, Mara Gupta Prabhu. Yeah, no, that's good. I'm glad you're paying attention. On the point of just to take the point of menial service even a little further. I was at a conference in Houston a couple of weeks ago, and there was a presentation on the Varnas. And you'd mentioned, you know, it's important to be engaged according to one's propensity and one's nature. And they were talking about that. And there's a very nice devotee. His name is Murli Gopal Prabhu, and he's like a PhD physicist, but he lived as a brahmachari in the Bhakti Center. No one even like knew this about him. Like he was just a book distributor at the Bhakti Center for 6 years. But then he got connected with the Bhaktivedanta Institute down in Alachua. And they do a lot of different scientific research, and he's involved with them now. But he gave this presentation on being involved in your Varnas and how important it is. And if you're not properly engaged, that eventually your desire to be going with devotional service for the longevity will eventually start to wane. And he gave some really very good examples I can share at another time in a class dedicated to that. But the conversation at the very end came back to this idea of menial service, that despite if one is a Brahmin or a Kshatriya or a Vaishya or a Sudra, this idea of menial service actually has to be there in the life of a devotee. Because you should not rob somebody of that experience, of the joy of that experience, simply because you're trying to adhere to one's Varna or ashram, or, okay, I don't do these types of things. And the example you gave, Ayendra Prabhu, you know, Brahminical, renounced devotee, but yet he was engaged in menial service, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you know, the examples are there, and, you know, we see it as Lord Chaitanya, that these types of services should never be abandoned. I remember Ravinda Shri Prabhu, when he was here, he'd walk around, and he's extremely scholarly, extremely academic, his classes were so well thought out and understood and delivered. He'd be walking around picking up trash around the property. I remember one time there was an overflow of the sewer lateral, and it was down there, and me and him were shoveling up the remainders of it. At a certain point, even though we have to engage in certain services that are either given to us or our propensity, we should never feel ourselves above the point where we come down and do the needful. And Mother Malati was speaking about this very strongly. She was saying we should never, lose this mentality that at the very end of the day, we are just servants of the servant of the servant of the servant. So I just.
Instruments or kirtan, I encourage them to involve themselves in like bathrooms or some kind of service because I feel it's hand in hand. Just like when I go on in the military and they serve the deities, to me it's just as special to doing, cleaning something because it's a Christian thing. It's the same. There's nothing there, but and it's nice. We're not second. We can take part in that deity worship, for that. And my toilets, truthfully, have made me better. Yeah. I really do.
Yeah, nice realization. Anybody from the audience on Zoom would like to ask anything or offer any realization? Okay. Last thing I'll end on was another Tamal Krishna Maharaj story. There's somebody went to them and he said, I was told I should come into the kitchen and clean the pots. And he looked at him and says, you want to clean the pots? You're not qualified to clean the pots. And but the message was that we should actually see these things as great opportunities, to come and engage in the Lord's service. That the Lord doesn't need me, I need the Lord. And then later on, that person, graduated to the point of cleaning the pots. When he says, first you have to, I forget what other service he said, first you have to do something else. And then once you do that, then you can graduate to clean the pots. And as you were saying, you're cleaning the pots, and they said, okay, you're cleaning the pots, now you can go on to this. So this helps us break our pride as well, our stubbornness, and really gets to see how everything is connected to Krishna. Our hearts become cleansed. We feel the joy in our heart. As Lord Chaitanya saw with Maharaj Pataparuja, he lowered himself to that level. And then what did he do? He gave him his association. Everything became revealed to him. Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.